Hi everyone, welcome to our regular video post. This time we are going to be talking about the union budget. In a couple of weeks, you will have the budget announcements. The reason why this particular budget assumes significance is because this is going to be the last full budget from this government before the general election in 2024. Of course, you will have one more budget in 24, but that's going to be more of an interim one, not a full-fledged one. For a long time, budget watchers, few things are fairly straight. One, budget is progressively becoming a non-event, notwithstanding the media buzz ahead of the event. Second, post-budget, the response from various constituencies, including India Inc., is fairly predictable. Post-budget, the pressure to be politically right far more outweighs the urge to be outspoken. So the response from the India Inc. as well as various other constituencies post-budget are fairly guarded and sugar-coated. And this time it's unlikely to be different. You will have responses coming from different quarters, but unlikely to be anything of material view. It does not mean that the media will not go into tizzy ahead of the budget. Of course, they will go into tizzy, only to get disappointed because very unlikely you will have any big bang announcements from this budget. There's another reason why budget is slowly losing relevance is most of the reforms happen outside budget. That's one. Second, chunk of the tax revenues, which is indirect tax, now happens outside budget. As all of us know, it happens at GST Council. So progressively, because of all these developments, it's become a non-event. That said, there are certain things which we can look at. We need to watch out for in the coming budget. Though it's becoming less relevant, but still it makes lot more sense to understand what kind of trend, underlying trend, if at all there is one, for various budgets of this particular government. So if there is any particular trend, any particular pattern which comes out of all the budgets this government has presented since 2014, how that particular trend is going to consolidate and how that trend is going to play out in the FY24 budget, which is what we are going to discuss. That's the topic of this discussion. Before that, the good news is FY23, going by estimates, government is, very comfortably is going to meet the fiscal target of 6.4% of GDP. And this is in spite of a huge hike in allocation for fertilizer and food subsidy. The reason why they are comfortable in terms of meeting the numbers is because of the huge surge in tax collection. But for the hike in fertilizer and food subsidy, probably they would have overachieved in terms of their fiscal numbers. So coming back to the question, is there a common thread? Is there an underlying trend that's running across all the budget of this particular government? If there is one, how it's going to play out in the coming budget? Is there a big picture which is popping out from all the budgets? If you look at closely the numbers, there is one trend which is very, very discernible. And you got to look at two data points for this, which is what we will closely watch out even in the coming budget. Which are these data points? One is the subsidy as a percentage of GDP. The other one is the capex allocation as a percentage of GDP. If you look at if at all there is any trend in this, across the budgets of this government, it is this, which is the government is putting concerted efforts to shift the expenditure from non-productive to productive side. So if you look at the percentage of expenditure in subsidy, which has been gradually coming down, and the percentage of expenditure in terms of capital allocation, capex, which is gradually moving up. So from 2014, if you look at, the number, which is subsidy as a percentage of GDP, has come down from 2.3 to now 1.3%. Whereas capex expenditure, capex allocation has gone up from 1.6% of GDP to 2.75%. And this trend is really visible across the budgets. And the one which we need to watch out in the coming budget is whether the government is going to consolidate this and take a step further and move the capex allocation closer to 3% of the GDP, which is a key metric which will have to be watched out in this budget. So one more thing we need to emphasize here. It's not that by reducing the subsidy as a percentage of GDP, the government has denied subsidy to the well-deserved. What government has done is, by using technology through DBT, they have really made the distribution process far more efficient, thereby stopping leakages and saving this money from subsidy and shifting that saving to productive expenditure, which is capital expenditure. This is the one trend which we'll watch out for, and I think most likely, I think the government will consolidate this trend and move towards move in terms of higher allocation for capex, probably to the closer to 3% of GDP. And this is one quiet reform, and I would say it's a hidden reform, which has a lot more implication for longer term growth for economy. And though it may not sound like a big bang, but over a period of time, government is very, 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 it diligently moved the expenditure from subsidy to capex. And that's a very, may not sound as a bold reform, but it's a very quiet, hidden reform, which is going to have a solid long-term implication for the economy. So beyond this particular trend, which we talked about, the structural shift from, non-productive to productive expenditure, what else one should look for in this budget? That's very interesting. One is, of course, beyond this, key announcements in terms of capex, you will have the usual high pitch announcements in terms of social and welfare allocations, though it will be high pitch during the budget speech. In terms of quantum, it's unlikely to be a material one. The other thing which will be interesting for investors to watch out for is this budget. I mean, this government. One of the hallmark of this government has been fiscal prudence. To that extent, I think government will try to achieve a stringent fiscal number in the coming budget. The estimate is probably they look at 5.9 or 6% or below that in terms of fiscal target, which they'll aim to achieve. The other thing which the government is, this finance ministry or the government has consistently done is, in terms of revenue projection, they have been always conservative. Look at what happened in FY23. The estimate in terms of GDP numbers, growth numbers, the nominal GDP, the budget assumed 11%. Look at where they ended up. The actual numbers which they're likely to end up in terms of nominal GDP growth is about 15%. That's one of the reasons they have a huge surge in tax collections. So something similar is likely to be playing out in the coming budget as well. So, the government will be a lot more conservative in its assumption on revenue. In terms of nominal GDP, probably they would assume only 10% or around that. And real GDP growth, they're unlikely to assume anything beyond 6%. That, in a way, makes the budget projections and also the credibility of fiscal numbers a lot more high. And that's likely to be the case even for the coming budget. And there's the usual buzz around the budget in terms of capital gains tax, rationalization. This time is no different. There's a lot of buzz in terms of rationalizing the capital gains tax. Market's view is that it's very unlikely that the government would probably touch that at this point of time. Maybe keep it for some other time. And in terms of divestments, very, very unlikely, given the election cycle, they'll be very ambitious. Given the scenario that even the revised to lower number of 70,000 crores is unlikely to be achieved for FY23, probably government will be a lot more conservative when it comes to divestment. And in terms of nationalization of two banks, which was announced, as a bold measure in FY23. It's not likely to see the light of the day. Most likely, given the election year next year, it is very likely that the government will drop this measure for the time being. And so overall, the market view is the government is unlikely. Government shouldn't do anything that could risk the current momentum. So the market will be a lot more happy. They leave if the budget doesn't do much and leave the momentum as it is. That's what is likely. I mean, that's the key expectation from the market. There's one more risk which we need to be aware of. That is being an election year, being in the election cycle and 1 year ahead of the general election. There'll be a lot of temptation for the government to go hugely populist. The market really hopes that the government does not yield to the temptation and stick to its fiscal path. Interesting times. Let's watch out on February 1st, what all key announcements and key metrics which we talked about in this video post to materialize in the budget. So with this, let me conclude the session. Hope you found this interesting and informative. If you find so, please do like the post and please do subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can get your regular updates. Thanks for watching and happy value investing. See you in my next. Thank you.